This is the World Organic News, the week ending 24th of December 2018. John Moore reporting. Decarbonise the air and recarbonise the soil. We begin this week with a post from Swift Science entitled, "The soil we live on is disappearing and it is your responsibility." Quote, "We rely on soil for almost all aspects of our lives, from the food and water we consume, the clothes we wear to the buildings we live in. However, a population rise, poor farming practices and changing land use has put immense pressure on this humble but essential resource. With 1,390 trillion kilos of soil, or 2,800,000 football pitches lost each year from erosion." End quote. This is a worry. From the Dust Bowl of the US during the Great Depression to the dust storms of today across China and Australia, soil has been treated like dirt. Soil is, of course, so much more. The Dust Bowl was reversed. Drought effects in China and Australia can be mitigated with regenerative techniques. That is not to say droughts will cease to be, but their effects will be less severe. The post goes on to quote a UN report that points to the developing world as the hope for the world's soils. This is based upon the fact there is more land to bring into cultivation in these areas. Done correctly, this could be the greatest of resources. Unfortunately, most of the soil is under forests. Rainforests in South America and across Southeast Asia, and in the drier parts across Africa. You can see the problem. These forests are better used for the good of all, being left as forests. The thing with soil erosion is we already know what it is, how it is caused and how to fix it. Things like contour ploughing if we must plough, keeping the soil covered, over-sowing with later growing cover crops that maintain soil coverage after cereal harvest and so on. I notice in Ireland that maize, corn in other words, is grown under plastic mulch strips. While not a fan of plastic in the paddock, this is a response to EU standards on soil erosion and the bareness of soils during the growing season. So erosion can be stopped. It takes a whole of landscape approach, tree plantings in the uplands to slow the rate of water flow in heavy rainfall events, conservation farming and regenerative grazing on productive land, all assist. The author of the blog post quoted above is critical of individuals who benefit from soil but do not even consider it. I think this is a bit harsh, but a good summary of the disconnection between urban dwellers and the food system anyway. Final quote from the piece. Quote, "Whilst it remains true the most important land for ensuring soil survival is in the land of poorer countries, this is a global issue and one that takes global responsibilities. Poorer countries and their farmers need help from the rest of the world, including you, if we are to have any hope of sustaining this precious resource for future generations." End quote. Our next post, 4 per thousand, Regenerative Agriculture and the Climate, from the Organic Dairy and Pastoral Group blog, points to how we can in fact grow the soil we have and reverse the CO2 accumulated in the atmosphere by recarbonising the soil. An annual growth rate of 0.4% in the soil carbon stocks would halt the increase in CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere related to human activities. The aim of the 4 per thousand initiative is to demonstrate that agriculture, in particular agricultural soils, can play a crucial role where food security and climate change are concerned. This short film ties the water and carbon cycle to the 5 principles of regenerative ag and the government policy to incentivise change. End quote. The link in the show notes will get you to the 3.5-minute film, and it really is worth a look. As this podcast and in the accompanying blog have been saying for some time, we can reverse the effects of CO2 build-up in the atmosphere and improve food production at the same time. Reasons why this is not being seized by the political classes of the world has baffled me, and I've come to a few conclusions. No tinfoil hat is required here. The idea of regenerative ag hasn't crossed their desks. Unlikely, but possible. The process of regenerative agriculture could remove the need for a carbon tax and carbon trading. This would mean that the sectors responsible for climate change in the first place, the financial system and all the others that they support, would not be given the opportunity to make a killing on the mitigation side. Another reason regen is ignored is that it would mean the carbon-based energy system would not have to change very quickly, if at all. The argument goes along the lines of, the soil is already taking up all the carbon we're burning, so why should we stop burning carbon? End of air quotes there. There are, of course, many other polluting effects from the burning of fossil fuel beyond the carbon effects, and these would wash out of the biosphere in time once they were eventually not being continually fed. The main reason I think regen hasn't been seized and run with is that it seems too good to be true. But it is not too good to be true. What regen can give us is breathing space. A few years of effort and the carbon moved from the atmosphere to the soil will take the extremes out of the weather. The weather is how we experience the climate on a day-to-day basis, after all. Cyclones, hurricanes, droughts, floods will all still occur, but with less extreme effects once the excess carbon has been removed. The post quoted pointed to the site, the 4 per 1,000 initiative. Formed after COP21 in Paris, it seems unlikely any policymaker wouldn't have been exposed to the regen story. The 4 per 1,000 initiative website points to some simple, relatively simple techniques to accomplish what we're all looking to do. Halt temperature rise at 1.5 degrees C above what it was prior to the Industrial Revolution. And from the post, quote, policy measures need to be put in place. 1. Reduce deforestation. 2. Encourage agroecological practices that increase the quantity of organic matter in soils to meet the 0.4% or 4 parts per thousand target each year. For example, do not leave bare soil and work at less to limit carbon losses. In fact, the more you cover the soil, the more the soil becomes rich in organic matter and thus in carbon. Nurture the soils with manure and compost. Restore crops, pastures and degraded forests in the arid and semi-arid areas of the planet. Plant trees and legumes, for example, which also fix nitrogen from the atmosphere to the soil, favouring the foliar growth of plants, and collect water at the foot of plants. End quote. Permaculture, biodynamics, Fukuoka's natural farming. All these systems which will and are achieving the results required. We can do this as a species, as a sector, and as individuals. And on that note, I'll draw this episode to a conclusion. Remember, decarbonise the air, recarbonise the soil. So with all of the above in mind and the fact that we live in the 21st century, I'm opening up applications for a Regenerative Agriculture Mastermind group. It will be limited to 12 people. We'll meet weekly online to discuss our successes, challenges and decision making. The wisdom of the crowd, if you like, applied to this necessary field of endeavour. The crowd, though, would be a crowd of peers rather than just a mob. You can have a look at the intro page and click through to the application at worldorganicnews.com/mastermind-application. There's also a link in the show notes. Of course, the podcasting checklists are still available over at mrjohnmoore.com, and a transcript of this episode is available at worldorganicnews.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.